The galaxy of Orvan was home to hundreds of worlds, all ruled under the golden banner of the Vaylon Empire. The Vaylons were tall, elegant beings with pale silver skin and glowing eyes. Their cities floated among clouds, and their ships glided silently across the stars. They had conquered many races and believed none could stand against them. Humans, they said, were only myths, old stories told by travelers who spoke of ancient wars that ended before any of them were born. To the Vaylons, humans were gone, just like the dust of old planets. On the capital world, Vaylon Prime, the royal court was in session. The throne hall shimmered with crystal pillars, and the air smelled of burning gold leaves. Queen Alara sat on her high throne, watching her ministers argue about trade routes and border patrols. Her daughter, Princess Nira, stood beside her, silent and proud. Nira was known throughout the empire for her sharp mind and colder heart. She was trained as both a diplomat and a warrior, but she had little patience for weakness. To her, power and control were the only things that mattered. That morning, the sky above the capital turned red. The guards at the tower reported an unknown ship entering the atmosphere. It was old, burnt on the sides, and had strange markings that no one could read. The Queen ordered it brought to the royal landing bay for inspection. Generals and scientists gathered to see what had survived such destruction. The ship's doors opened slowly, releasing smoke and sparks. Out stepped a man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing broken armor. His helmet was cracked, his right arm bled slightly, and his eyes looked tired yet focused. He carried no weapon. The soldiers raised their plasma rifles, shouting commands. The man didn't move. He looked at them calmly and said in a steady voice, "I come in peace." The sound of his voice spread through the hall. It was firm, deep, and human. The soldiers exchanged glances. One of them whispered, "It speaks the old tongue." The word spread like fire, human. Within minutes, the news reached the Queen's ears. The impossible had happened. A human had arrived on Vaylon Prime. When Sol was brought before the royal court, the entire hall went silent. The Queen leaned forward, her golden crown shining in the light. "You are human?" she asked in disbelief. Sol nodded once. "I am." His armor bore a faded emblem, a circle with a small blue world in the center. "Earth Command," one of the scholars whispered. "That world was destroyed centuries ago." Sol didn't respond. He stood straight, his hands behind his back. His face showed neither fear nor pride, only calm acceptance. Princess Nira watched him from the side. She had never seen such a being. His eyes were not like any Vaylon's. They were brown, deep, and filled with something she couldn't name. He looked as if he had seen everything yet feared nothing. "State your purpose," the Queen ordered. "Why have you come to my world?" "My ship was attacked," Sol said slowly. "We were traveling through Sector 9. We were hit by a Zarath swarm vessel. My crew didn't survive. I ejected before the ship broke apart. I found your signal and followed it." His words were simple, but the way he spoke them carried strength. He didn't tremble, didn't beg for help, didn't ask for mercy. He only told the truth. The mention of the Zarath swarm caused a stir. They were an old enemy, creatures of metal and bone who devoured entire systems. Many believed they had been wiped out decades ago. If they had returned, then danger was near. One of the ministers stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this creature could be lying. Perhaps he is a spy, sent to learn our weaknesses." Others agreed. They saw the human not as a survivor, but as a threat. The Queen looked at Sol again. "Do you come to fight, or do you come to seek shelter?" "I come to live," Sol said quietly. "But if you are at war with the swarm, I can fight." The room fell silent again. His tone was not arrogant. It was certain. He spoke as if fighting was simply what he was meant to do. The generals murmured among themselves. The Vaylons were skilled, but their kind had not faced real war for generations. They fought with machines, not with spirit. The humans seemed like a remnant from another time, a time when courage decided victory more than weapons. Princess Nira stepped forward for the first time. Her silver armor gleamed as she looked at Sol closely. "You fought the swarm before?" she asked. Sol nodded. "Many times. They learn fast, but they fear fire and unity. Once they sense division, they strike harder." His eyes met hers. For a moment, Nira felt a strange chill. His gaze was steady, almost warm, but filled with pain she could not imagine. "You speak like a soldier," she said. "I am one," Sol replied. "Or I was." The Queen watched the two of them in silence. There was something in the way her daughter looked at him that made her uneasy. The court demanded that Sul be imprisoned until his truth could be confirmed. The queen agreed, though her voice carried doubt. Sul was led away in chains, though he didn't resist. That night, the palace was restless. The scholars studied his ship and found signs of real battles. Laser burns, alien claws, human technology long forgotten. Every detail matched his story. Yet many in the court still whispered in fear. To them, humans were chaos given form. They had once fought the Valans in ancient times, and though those wars were long over, the memory remained in old songs and tales. Now one of them stood in their palace. In the dim light of her chamber, Princess Nira could not stop thinking about the human. His calm words, his quiet strength, and his steady eyes refused to leave her mind. She was raised among prideful lords who spoke of honor but ran from real danger. Sol was different. He didn't need to prove anything. He simply existed, and that presence alone felt heavier than any crown. The next morning, Nira asked her mother for permission to see the human prisoner. The queen hesitated but allowed it. "Be careful," she warned. "Humans are unpredictable." The guards opened the cell door. Sol sat on a metal bench, his armor placed neatly beside him. He looked up as Nira entered. She expected him to stand, but he remained seated, respectful yet calm. "Princess," he greeted her with a nod. "You are brave to call me that," Nira said, crossing her arms. "You stand before the future ruler of this empire." Sul gave a faint smile. "Then the empire has a strong future." His tone was simple, not flattering. Nira frowned slightly. "You speak without fear. Do you not understand where you are?" "I understand," Sul said. "I'm in a place that still believes in strength, but not yet in purpose." Nira tilted her head. "What do you mean by that?" "Strength is only real when it protects something worth dying for," he replied. "You have power, but you don't know what you're protecting." Nira was silent for a moment. No one had ever spoken to her like that. "And what do humans protect?" she asked. "Each other," Sul answered softly. "When we have nothing left, we fight for the person beside us. That is what makes us human." For the first time, Nira saw something more than a soldier. She saw a survivor who carried the memory of a whole race within his heart. His words echoed in her mind long after she left the cell. Later that day, a messenger arrived with grim news. The outer colonies had gone dark. No signals, no ships returning, only silence. The council gathered in fear, and Sol's warning about the swarm returned to their thoughts. The queen ordered an investigation, but she could already feel the shadow of war rising again. In the lower halls of the palace, Sol stood by the cell window, watching the alien city glowing beneath the twin moons. He didn't know what would happen next, but he could sense the coming storm. Somewhere beyond the stars, the swarm was moving, and deep inside he knew he would have to fight once more, not for his world, but for this one that still didn't trust him. For the Valans, the arrival of the human was the beginning of something they didn't yet understand. For Sul, it was the continuation of an old promise, to stand firm even when all others turned away. And for Princess Nira, it was the first time her heart began to question what truly made a ruler strong. The next morning, the royal palace of Valan Prime was filled with tension. Word of the humans' arrival had spread across the empire. In the crowded markets and shining streets, citizens whispered stories about the ancient species that once fought the universe itself. Some said humans were monsters. Others said they were heroes. But no one could decide which was true. Inside the grand hall, the Council of Valan gathered to decide Sol's fate. The long glass windows cast bright light across the silver floor. Generals in dark armor stood in silence. The queen sat on her throne, her expression calm, but her eyes full of worry. Princess Nira stood beside her mother, her mind restless since her meeting with the human. The trial began when 2 guards led Sol into the chamber. His hands were bound, his armor removed, yet he walked tall, his face unreadable. Every eye followed him as he was brought to stand before the council table. Minister Varan, a tall Valan with golden eyes, spoke first. "You are Sol, a human soldier. Your kind was lost from this galaxy centuries ago. You claim to come from a destroyed ship attacked by the Zareth swarm. Yet you expect us to believe that you arrived here by chance?" Sol met his gaze. "I don't expect belief," he said calmly. "I only speak the truth." The council members exchanged glances. They were not used to such simple answers. Most beings who stood before them begged or lied. This one did neither. Another general leaned forward. "If your story is true, then you have fought the swarm. Tell us what you know of them. Sol took a breath and began to speak. The Zareth swarm does not negotiate. They consume. They move from one system to the next, feeding on energy, metal, and life. They learn from every battle. The only way to survive them is to strike first and never stop moving. His tone was calm but heavy, as if each word carried memory. A silence filled the chamber. The queen studied his face and asked, "How many worlds have fallen to them?" Sol's eyes lowered slightly. "Too many," one of the younger officers frowned. "You speak like you have fought them alone." Sol looked up. "Not alone, but when they came, few stood their ground." His words carried a quiet sadness. For the first time, Nira saw something behind his calm face, a deep grief that time could not erase. Minister Varen slammed his hand on the table. "Enough stories. If this creature truly fought the swarm, then he is a warrior. Let him prove it. Or admit that he is a spy sent to weaken us." The queen raised her hand to silence the hall. "And how do you suggest he prove his truth?" Varen smiled coldly. "A trial of strength. Let him face our finest warriors in the arena. If he survives, we will listen. If he fails, we will know he lies." The queen looked at Sol. "Will you accept this trial?" Sol nodded without hesitation. "Yes," the court murmured in surprise. Nira looked at him sharply. "You don't even know what you are agreeing to," she said. "I know enough," Sol replied quietly. "If strength is your measure of truth, then I will show it." The next morning, the arena was filled with spectators. The wide dome was built from silverstone and energy shields designed to hold any battle within. Warriors of the Royal Guard entered, shining in their armor, carrying curved blades of light. Sol stood alone at the center, wearing only a light combat vest and gloves. The crowd whispered as he stretched his arms, his calm eyes scanning the fighters around him. A horn sounded. The trial began. The first guard rushed forward, swinging his energy blade. Sol stepped aside and caught the soldier's wrist, pulling him forward and sending him to the ground with a quick movement. The crowd gasped. Another guard attacked from behind. Sol ducked, twisted, and used his elbow to knock the attacker's helmet aside. Every move was fast and precise, no wasted motion. He didn't fight like the Vaylons. They fought to show skill. Sol fought to survive. Princess Nira watched from the royal balcony. Her hands were tight on the railing. She had seen many warriors train, but never like this. Sol didn't show pride or anger. His face stayed calm, his breathing steady. When he was struck, he didn't flinch. When he struck, he did so with purpose. After several minutes, 10 guards lay on the ground. The crowd grew silent. Sol stood in the center again, his shirt torn, sweat on his face, but his posture firm. Minister Viren rose from his seat, angry. "He has tricks, nothing more." "Let the champion test him." The arena gates opened, and the royal champion Karan entered. He was twice Sol's size, wearing thick armor and holding a staff crackling with energy. The crowd cheered. Karan was undefeated. Sol didn't move. His eyes focused on the champion as if studying a puzzle. Karan roared and charged. The sound echoed through the arena. The first strike hit the ground beside Sol, sending dust into the air. Sol stepped back, watching carefully. Karan swung again, faster this time. Sol ducked, rolled to the side, and struck the armor joint under the arm. The hit made a loud metallic sound. Karan staggered but recovered quickly. The two circled each other. Karan was powerful, but Sol was patient. He waited for a mistake. When Karan raised his staff for a heavy strike, Sol moved in close and struck 3 times, neck, knee, and chest. The champion fell to one knee, his armor smoking from the impact. The crowd went silent again. Sol didn't raise his hands in victory. He simply stepped back and said, "The trial is done." The queen stood from her seat, her voice clear and strong. "Enough! The human has proven his strength. He speaks the truth." The arena exploded in cheers and shouts. Half were amazed, half were afraid. Nira kept watching him, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. Later that day, Sol was brought to the council chamber again. The queen faced him with a calmer expression now. "You fought with discipline and restraint. You did not kill any of our soldiers even when you could have." "Why?" Sol replied. "Because they were not my enemies." Nira stepped forward. "You said you fought the swarm. If they return, would you fight again?" Sol looked at her and nodded. "If they come, I will stand. But I cannot do it alone." The queen looked to her council. "We have been warned. If the swarm truly returns, we must prepare. This human has fought them before. Perhaps he can help us understand how." Minister Varen protested. "We cannot trust him. He is from a race of war and chaos. Nira turned sharply toward him, and yet he stood alone against 10 of our best and spared their lives. That is not chaos. That is control. The Queen raised her hand again. Enough. Sol will remain under guard, but he will be given access to our defense archives. If he lies, we will know. If he speaks truth, we will owe him our lives. Sol bowed slightly. Thank you, Majesty. As he was escorted out, Nira followed him for a moment. When they were alone in the corridor, she asked, "Why did you really agree to the trial? You could have refused." Sol looked ahead as they walked. "I learned long ago that sometimes words are not enough. You have to show people what truth looks like." Nira studied his face. "And what does truth look like to you?" He glanced at her and gave a faint smile. "It looks like standing up even when no one believes in you." Nira didn't reply. His words stayed in her thoughts as she watched him disappear down the hall. That night, the Queen met with her generals. The reports from the outer colonies had grown worse. Ships were missing. Communication signals faded one after another. The Zareth swarm was returning. From the tower window, Princess Nira looked out at the stars. Somewhere beyond that light, the humans' enemies were moving closer, and for the first time she wondered if their survival now depended on the very being they once called a myth. Far below, in the quiet of his quarters, Sul sat beside a small window, cleaning his damaged armor. Each scratch told a story. Each mark was a reminder of those he had lost. He didn't know what the Valens planned, but he knew one thing clearly. The swarm never stopped, and when they came again, this world would need to learn what humanity truly meant. The wind outside whispered across the metal walls of the palace, carrying the sound of distant thunder. War was coming, and this time a human would stand at its heart. The days after the trial were quiet, but the quiet did not last long. Dark signs appeared across the outer systems. Trade ships went missing. Patrol fleets stopped sending reports. The Queen received broken messages filled with static and screams. Everyone feared what Sul had already warned them about. The Zareth swarm was coming. Sul spent his days studying the Valen defense systems. Their technology was powerful but too dependent on machines. They trusted automation more than instinct. "When the enemy adapts faster than your computers," Sul said to one of the generals, "you must rely on your people, not your systems." The general did not understand at first. To the Valens, machines never failed. But Sul had seen machines fall and worlds with them. Princess Nira often came to watch him work. She stood quietly while he drew plans and made notes. He spoke little unless she asked questions. "You plan as if you already fought this war," she said one evening. Saul looked up from the table. "Because I did." In the war room, Sul explained the swarm's tactics. "They move in waves," he said, pointing to the map. "They send drones first. Small, fast, used to test your reaction. When they find your weakness, the larger ships arrive. They attack until your defense breaks, then they consume what's left." His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "Your fleet's spread too thin. When the swarm comes, they will surround you." The generals murmured to each other. The Queen listened in silence. Finally she asked, "Then what should we do?" Saul looked at the map again. "We stand together. Pull your fleets home. Gather all defense ships around this world. If they want to take your throne, make them pay for every inch." The Queen nodded slowly. Some generals protested. They said retreating was cowardice. But Nira supported Saul's plan. "He understands this enemy," she said firmly. "If we ignore his warning, we may lose everything." Within 2 days, the Valan fleet began to regroup. Massive ships returned from far systems, their engines lighting up the skies above Valan Prime. The people watched in awe. They did not know that it might be their last sunrise in peace. On the 4th night, the sky turned dark. The first swarm ships appeared. They came without sound, moving like shadows. The air shook as alarms echoed through the city. From the highest tower, Nira saw the horizon burn. The swarm had arrived. The Queen ordered all civilians to shelters. The fleet lifted into the air, forming a wall of ships around the planet. Sol stood in the command center beside Nira, wearing repaired armor. His face was calm, but his eyes never left the display screens. "Once they begin," he said, "they won't stop." The battle began with light so bright it turned night into day. Plasma bolts crossed the sky and swarm drones filled the air like black clouds. Valan ships fired beams of energy, burning through the first wave. For a moment it looked like victory. Then the second wave arrived. Thousands of smaller swarm ships dropped from orbit, diving into the atmosphere. Their bodies were half metal, half living matter. They screeched as they crashed through the defense lines. Saul grabbed a communicator. "Ground units, hold formation. Focus fire on one target at a time. Don't scatter. Stay together." His voice carried across the channels. Nira looked at him. "You sound like a commander." "I was," Saul said simply. Down in the city streets, the Velon soldiers fought bravely but struggled to keep order. The swarm moved fast, crawling across buildings and breaking through walls. Saul and Nira rushed to the central gate, where the enemy was closing in. Saul picked up a fallen plasma rifle and checked the charge. "Stay behind cover," he told Nira. "You cannot command me," she said, lifting her blade. "I am not afraid to fight." Saul looked at her for a second. "Then fight smart," he said. The battle raged for hours. The sky thundered with explosions. Saul moved through the chaos with steady precision, giving orders and saving lives wherever he went. When a group of soldiers became trapped, he led a counterattack to free them. His calm voice on the radio gave everyone strength. The Velon soldiers began to fight differently. They stopped relying only on machines and started using teamwork. Saul's tactics spread through the ranks. "Hold the line," they shouted. "Do not let them break through." Nira fought beside her guards, her armor shining with energy. She had never seen war this close. Fear struck her heart, but Saul's presence kept her steady. Whenever he appeared, the soldiers around him fought harder. His courage spread like fire. After many hours, the main swarm ship descended. It was enormous, like a mountain of metal and bone. The ground shook as it landed beyond the city walls. Saul knew this was the core. "That is their command ship," he said. "If we destroy it, the smaller ones will lose control." Nira's eyes widened. "Then we must take it down." The Queen's voice came through the communicator. "Saul, I can send air support." He shook his head. "They won't make it through the defenses." "I'll go," Nira stepped forward. "Then I go too." Saul looked at her, his expression serious. "This is not your fight." She lifted her chin. "My people are dying. It is my fight." He nodded once. "Then stay close." They gathered a small squad and moved through the ruins. The night sky burned above them. Fires lit the streets as they crossed toward the swarm ship. Every few steps, drones attacked from the shadows. Saul led the group with precise shots. His aim was perfect, his movements quick. Nira watched him, amazed by how one human could move with such calm under fire. When they reached the outer wall of the ship, Saul placed a small device against the surface. "Charge set," he said. The explosion opened a hole big enough to enter. Inside, the walls pulsed with a strange light. The air smelled like metal and smoke. They moved carefully through the tunnels until they reached the core chamber. At the center stood the swarm brain, a massive sphere surrounded by cables and glowing eyes. Saul raised his weapon. "This is it," he said. "Cover me," the swarm reacted. Drones dropped from the ceiling. Nira swung her blade, cutting through the first wave. Saul ran to the core, planted explosives, and activated the timer. "We need to move," he shouted. They ran as the ship began to shake. The explosion spread fast, fire filling the tunnels. They escaped through the opening just as the ship exploded behind them, sending a shockwave through the air. The smaller swarm units fell from the sky, lifeless. The battlefield grew quiet. The soldiers looked around, confused, then began to cheer. The swarm was retreating. At dawn, the smoke cleared. The twin suns rose over the ruins of Velon Prime. The city was damaged, but it still stood. The people came out of shelters, crying in relief. The Queen looked from her tower at the horizon and whispered, "We are alive because of him." In the courtyard, Saul stood among the soldiers, his armor scorched, but his stance firm. Nira walked to him, her eyes filled with emotion she could not hide. "You did it," she said softly. "We did it," he replied. She looked at him for a long moment. "You led us like no one else could." Saul shook his head. "I only reminded you what you already had. Courage." When the Queen arrived, the people bowed. She raised her hand toward Saul. "You came to us as a stranger, yet you fought for us as one of our own. From this day forward, you are the guardian of Velon." The soldiers cheered his name. For the first time, Saul looked unsure. "Majesty, I don't need titles," he said. "Then take it as a promise," the Queen replied. "You are part of this world now." Nira stood beside him, proud and silent. The people saw the human and the princess together and felt hope rise in their hearts. The Velons had learned that machines could not win wars alone. It was will and unity that saved them. As the sun climbed higher, Sol looked at the sky where the swarm had fled. He knew this was not the end. The swarm would return, stronger and angrier. But for now, peace had come to Valen Prime, and deep inside, the human soldier who had lost everything felt something he had not felt in a long time: belonging. The aftermath of the battle left Valen Prime in a quiet chaos. Smoke rose from shattered towers and streets were lined with rubble and twisted metal. Citizens cautiously returned from shelters, their eyes wide with fear and relief. The city had survived, but the memory of destruction weighed heavily on everyone. Sol walked through the streets with Princess Nira by his side. Soldiers cleared debris and citizens whispered their gratitude as they passed. Many could not believe that one human had helped save them from the swarm. Sol did not seek praise. He moved with quiet purpose, checking on survivors, offering guidance to the Valan soldiers. Each small action reminded people that courage could inspire even in the darkest hours. Nira stayed close to him, watching how he interacted with the people. Unlike many of her world, he treated everyone equally, giving respect and hope to each person. She had seen her people panic when the swarm attacked, and she realized how different Sol was. He did not just fight for victory. He fought for life, for survival, and for those who could not fight for themselves. By mid-morning, the royal palace had been partially repaired. The queen called for a council meeting. The hall was quiet as the generals and ministers filed in, all waiting to see what the human soldier would say next. Sol entered the chamber, his armor still scorched from the battle, and walked to the front without hesitation. Queen Alara's voice was calm but filled with emotion. "Sol, you have saved this world. You fought when our own people hesitated. You have earned our gratitude." Sol bowed slightly. "Majesty, I only did what was necessary. I fought to protect those who could not protect themselves." One of the generals frowned. "You are from another world. How can we trust a human to advise us? We are Valans. Our strategies have kept us safe for centuries." Sol looked at him steadily. "Your strategies worked until they met an enemy who adapts faster than your calculations. You have strength, but strength without direction is like a ship without a rudder. You can win some battles, but you cannot win the war without understanding your enemy, and relying on those who fight with courage, not machines." The council murmured. Many were offended by the simplicity of his words, but the queen nodded. "He speaks truth. This world owes him more than we can repay." Nira stepped forward. "He is not here to conquer us or rule us. He is here to protect us. That is why we must listen to him." The council could not deny the results of the battle. Sol had faced impossible odds and had led a small group of Valan soldiers to victory. His methods were different, but they had worked. The queen allowed him to oversee the repair of the defense systems and to train selected soldiers in new strategies. During the days that followed, Sol worked tirelessly. He taught the soldiers to coordinate their movements, to watch each other's backs, and to think creatively in battle. He emphasized discipline and courage, showing them that the human way of fighting was not reckless but focused on survival and unity. Soldiers who had once doubted him began to respect him deeply. Nira often joined him in the training fields. She had her own combat skills, but she learned from Sol a new way of seeing the battlefield. He did not just fight with strength or weapons. He fought with understanding. "You think too much about your pride," he said one day as she sparred with him. "Pride will cost lives. Focus on protecting your people, not your reputation." Nira nodded slowly. His words stayed with her long after the training sessions ended. She realized that being a ruler was more than wearing a crown. It was about responsibility, sacrifice, and courage. Sol reminded her of the meaning of leadership in a way she had never understood before. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the city, Nira found Sol standing on the balcony of the palace, looking out at the ruins below. She joined him silently. "You saved them," she said quietly. "All those people down there. You saved them." Sol did not turn to her. "They saved themselves too. They just needed someone to show them the way." Nira's eyes reflected the moonlight. "You did more than that. You taught them what it means to fight for something worth living for." He finally looked at her. "I only fight the battles that need fighting. The rest is up to them." For a moment, Nira felt a strange warmth. She had grown up in a world where leaders gave orders from high thrones, where soldiers followed without thought. Sol was different. He led by example. He did not demand loyalty. He inspired it. The queen entered quietly behind them. She had watched their interaction from afar for weeks. Princess Sol has reminded us what courage truly is, she said softly. Not just the courage to fight, but the courage to protect and the courage to guide. That is what makes a leader great. Nira nodded. I understand now. Strength alone is not enough. It is the heart and the mind together that matter. The days passed and slowly the city began to heal. Buildings were repaired, trade resumed, and the people returned to their lives. Yet the memory of the swarm remained. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the Zareth returned. One morning, Sol received a report from the outer colonies. Several planets had reported signs of the swarm regrouping. It was not a full attack yet, but the warning was clear. The Queen summoned the council again. We must prepare, Sol said. The swarm is not gone. They will return stronger and more organized. We cannot wait for them to strike again. The generals argued, suggesting building more ships or creating stronger weapons. Sol shook his head. Machines alone will not win this fight. Your people need courage. They need leadership they can trust. They need to fight as one. Nira stepped forward. He is right. I have seen him in battle. I have seen what humans can do when they fight for life, not for power. We must learn from him, not dismiss him because he is different. The council finally agreed. Sol was given full access to the defense strategies of Valen Prime. He worked day and night, redesigning the training programs, coordinating fleet positions, and preparing the soldiers for the next attack. Through it all, Nira stayed close. She learned from him, not just in strategy but in understanding courage. She began to see that the human way was not just about fighting. It was about hope, sacrifice, and trust. These were lessons she had never been taught in the palace. One night, as the city slept, Nira found herself standing beside Sul on the palace balcony again. The stars sparkled above them, peaceful for the first time in weeks. You never asked for this, she said softly. To lead us, to fight our battles. I was asked, Sul replied simply. By those who needed someone to stand when all else failed. Nira looked at him and realized she had never met anyone like him before. His presence was calm but strong. He carried no arrogance, yet his courage inspired everyone around him. She understood why the people had begun to call him a legend, and why the Queen trusted him more than anyone else in the Empire. You are different from anyone I have known, she said. I am human, he replied quietly. We have always been different. That is why we survived. Nira did not answer. She stayed beside him, watching the city below. The twin suns were about to rise, casting golden light over the repaired streets. Sol had saved them from destruction, and yet she felt that he had done more than that. He had reminded them what it meant to fight with heart and courage, to inspire even when the odds seemed impossible. The weight of victory pressed upon the palace, but for the first time, it felt lighter. Sol had shown that true strength was more than weapons or armies. It was about people, about leadership, about the courage to face impossible odds and still move forward. And somewhere deep inside, Princess Nira knew that when the next challenge came, she would not be the same ruler she had been before. She had learned from the human soldier, and his lessons would guide her and her people through the trials to come. The night passed quietly, but the world had changed. Valen Prime had survived because of Sol. The people had hope. And a new chapter in the history of the galaxy had begun, one in which humanity's courage could shine even in the darkest moments.